the problem of utilization of water resources in the future is going to be very serious. And one of the anticipated environmental effects of global warming is to heighten these dangers, to reduce them. So we can expect, already have had water wars in addition to other resource wars. These things, exactly how avoidable this is, we don't know. I mean, some scientists argue that we've maybe even passed a critical point where not too much can do about it. But we can, once again, be confident that the longer the delay, the worse the effects are going to be, primarily for the poor, as usual.
Professor Chomsky, following up on what you said about Israel-Palestine, Jimmy Carter, the former USA president, recently in his book, he described the situation in Israel-Palestine as an apartheid system. To what extent do you agree on that?
To what extent do I agree with? I didn't hear the last word.
With the description of the situation as being an apartheid system.
Yeah. Well, there was a huge furor about Carter's use of the word apartheid, which is, again, pure cynicism. Terms used regularly in Israel. You can read it in the editorials of Israel's leading newspapers and commentary by leading analysts and so on, referring to the West Bank. Actually, there are things to be said about Israel proper, but let's put that aside. The occupied territories are commonly described as a system of apartheid. In fact, some describe it as much worse than apartheid, including Ronnie Kasrils, one of the leading Jewish, incidentally, South African opponents of apartheid, courageous man, minister in the government, traveling in the West Bank. He says it's worse than apartheid ever was. But the use of the word apartheid for the West Bank is at least appropriate and not controversial. And the hysterical reaction to it in the United States is a sign of the decline of democracy. In a functioning democratic society, people ought to know that. But it's the kind of part of the ideological sign of it. What about the rest of the book? Actually, he gave a pretty accurate description of what it's like in the occupied territories, which is rare. That's sometimes done, but rare. The book actually had, there were hordes of people trying to find some error in the book to discredit it. There's article after article finding some trivial phrase that you could misinterpret. There is actually one serious error in the book, but that's been totally ignored. The one serious error in the book is Carter's reference to Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982. And what he says is the invasion was taken in response to Palestinian terrorism in the north of Israel. Well, that's the conventional line, and it's a total fabrication. All the documentation is fully available. It was available in 1982 and 83. There was a ceasefire initiated by the United States, incidentally. The Palestinians lived up to it. Israel didn't. They continued their regular attacks in Lebanon, often killing lots of people, in an obvious effort to elicit some PLO response, Palestinian response, which could be used as a pretext for the invasion. If you want precision, there were two very light and symbolic retaliations, period. The rest of it was all Israeli attacks. A lot of it was reported, in fact. Again, killing people, bombing, and so on. Well, when they couldn't get a pretext for the invasion, they just invaded anyway, with U.S. support. Killed maybe 20,000 people, destroyed a large part of southern Lebanon, all the way up to the parts of Beirut. Well, Carter repeats the conventional falsification about this, and that's the one serious error in the book, but nobody's ever mentioned it, because it's considered appropriate to fabricate in support of state policy. That's a very important principle, has to be preserved. We have to have the right to lie in support of state crimes. So that error is ignored. There was also one major contribution in the book, which was also ignored. Carter, I think, is the first person in the mainstream. It's been discussed in dissident circles, but the first person in the mainstream to report and give the evidence for the fact that Israel instantly rejected the roadmap of the quartet. The quartet is U.S., UN, European Union, and Soviet Union who established the so-called roadmap, which is politely described as George Bush's vision as to how to proceed to resolve the conflict. Well, standard line is, terrible Arabs didn't live up to the roadmap. In fact, Israel instantly rejected the roadmap, and that's quite important. One of the pretexts for strangling Palestinians, Britain and the rest of Europe are involved in this too, punishing them for voting the wrong way in a free election in January 2006, severely punish them. One of the pretexts is that the party with the plurality of votes, Hamas, doesn't accept the roadmap. Well, it's rather important that Israel rejected it instantly. How did they reject it? In the usual deceitful way that governments use, formally accepted it and then immediately added 14 reservations, which completely eviscerated. You can read them in the appendix to Carter's book. Actually, they have been available for years, and people like me talk about them, but never entered the mainstream. Okay, it entered the mainstream with Carter's book, and it's very significant, right for today. I haven't seen a mention of that. So the two most important parts of his book, as far as I'm aware, are unmentioned. One, what he revealed about this crucial matter of the roadmap. And when I say Israel rejected it, I again mean the United States and Israel rejected it. Israel's rejection was approved by the United States. So yes, the U.S. Undermined the roadmap that's supposed to be Bush's vision. Those two, the most important contribution of the book and the one serious error in the book, passed without comment, which tell us something about our own intellectual culture, about our universities, for example, where the intellectual culture is formed and developed. There's a principle which says it's appropriate, in fact even noble, to lie in support of state crimes. It's criminal to tell the truth that would reveal the nature of state crimes. I'm purposely exaggerating, but not too much. And this is a clear example of it. So yes, apart from this, Carter's book was, good, reporting things that ought to be known, but that aren't known, and was therefore a contribution. It's, speaking about public opinion again, it's notable that though the book was bitterly lambasted in commentary in the press and editorials and so on, it was at the top of the bestseller list.